topic which we could not cover earlier in the last session, which is about city sanitation planning. How do we plan on a long-term, medium, and long-term basis? What are the steps we follow? And some of the learnings we have gained in planning for urban sanitation. I will spend about 25 to 30 minutes. Then we get on to the core discussion, which is about strengthening accountability. It's a bit of sort of a vague topic. Accountability is such a vague topic that, if I say to a politician, are you accountable? He or she will say, yes, I'm accountable because voters have voted me. They have elected me. So every 5 years, I go back and I'm accountable to citizens. Similarly, if I ask civil society, or if I ask civil servant or a municipal official, they'll say, are you accountable? They'll say, yeah, I'm governed by rules and regulations. And I follow as per the mandate of the government. So I'm accountable to the government. So if everyone is accountable, why service delivery is suboptimal? So that's where this conversation of accountability is very, very important. I will translate this sort of theoretical concept of accountability into very practical tools, how we can strengthen accountability of service delivery agency in the context of citywide inclusive sanitation. We will unpack this concept little gradually with some examples from Japan, with examples from India, and some examples from all over the world. You heard the video speaking about having an independent regulator, like power sector regulator. Why don't we have a water and sanitation regulator? We have regulators in all the countries. We have power sector independent regulator for power, independent regulator for telecom, independent regulator for real estate now. So why not we have independent regulator for water and sanitation? These are the conversations that are happening around the world. So we will discuss some of those. So let me start by introducing some of our experience of what you call planning for citywide inclusive sanitation and service delivery. So the next 20-25 minutes, feel free to raise any points, any concerns. Seshipriya, if there are any points in the chat box, please alert me and you can raise your hand and then we can have a conversation. Now, as you know, sanitation is not a one-day exercise or a 2-day exercise or a 1 month or 1 year. It's a long-term planning service delivery issue. No city can achieve sanitation even in decades. It takes decades to get on with the sanitation improvements. And many cities that we consider them as good practices, they took 15-20 years to achieve what they have achieved. So it's important for all of us, while we are preparing for sanitation improvement and service delivery improvement, we need to have clarity of how we should proceed. So it is in this context that I'm going to introduce you to how we do what is called city sanitation service delivery planning. Now, it entails 4 important aspects. When we are speaking about sanitation planning, number 1, we need to understand the current situation of the city. Situation not in terms of demography, not in terms of sanitation situation, but also in terms of geography, socioeconomic conditions, the topography, the density. So the city sanitation planning builds on the current land use, current socioeconomic conditions, current inclusion and exclusion related issues like slums and non-slum areas, gender disaggregated data. So the current sanitation situation is a starting point. Now, for doing that, we have introduced you to a number of tools like sheet flow diagrams and many other tools. So those tools can be used to map the current sanitation situation. This is step 1. The step 2 in the planning process is what is called identifying the needs or requirements to achieve your sanitation goals. So you need to define what are your sanitation goals. Like in some countries, like in Bangladesh, like in Nepal, India, and even many countries in Africa, we have what is called service level benchmarks. For example, SDG also outlines certain service level benchmarks, like every household should have a toilet, every household should have a safely managed sanitation, every household has to desludge once in 2 to 3 years, it has to be safely transported, the wastewater has to be treated and collected, it has to meet environmental standards. So these are called benchmarks. So we need to understand the needs and requirements to achieve that benchmarks. Thirdly, how do I achieve that? What is the strategy one should follow to achieve these goals in a sustainable manner? Both, when I use the word sustainability, it is not only environmental sustainability, but also financial sustainability. One way of looking at it is to cover the whole city with sewer system, but it is not financially feasible or sustainable. So that's where we need to have a combination of sewer and non-sewer, centralized versus decentralized. So the strategy should be based in the hard reality of our situation as well as our aspiration. So the strategy would have both short-term, medium, and long-term. For example, even the best of the cities, global cities, the top-end cities, even there, it took almost 100 years to achieve the so-called sewer systems. So they went for a moderate coverage of sewer system. Then they have on-site systems. They have regulations to control on-site system. These are all short-term to medium strategy before they achieve long-term goals. Like you heard a lot about Japanese experience. The Japanese experience, even now, they have large presence of Jokaso system, which is on-site system, which is a short-term and medium-term goal before they move into their aspiration of a centralized sewer system. Now, in some cases, they may, like Dumagato city, they have chosen to have on-site sanitation system as their goal. So it is up to the city and their ability to pay, ability to the density factors and other factors, availability of water, that defines the goals. And then a strategy will help them to achieve the goal. Now, all these things have to be engaged or carried out in a collaborative manner, engaging stakeholders. So when we look at the city sanitation planning, city sanitation and service delivery planning, we look at these 4 fundamental starting points. What is the current situation? What is the requirement in terms of goals? And what is the strategy we follow? Some of you visited Warangal. We followed a similar approach. Now, what is the coverage of a city sanitation plan? The coverage is typically, we look at access issue, access to safe sanitation, safe containment, transportation, treatment, recycling, and disposal. We also look at wastewater and stormwater sometimes, because flooding is also a major issue in the context of climate change. We also look at flooding related issues, stormwater management issues, because sometimes the wastewater and stormwater combine and create problems. So that's also covered. And sometimes we also look at solid waste management and water to support sanitation. The city sanitation plan that we often do it, we don't plan for solid waste management, but wherever there is an interface issue, that is also covered. Like in Bangladesh now, the planning is both solid waste as well as sanitation together, which is a smart thing to do. And that's what they're doing. But in certain situations like us, we plan for solid waste management, which is different, which is a different nature of problem. We do it separately, but wherever there is an interface between solid waste and sanitation, we integrate it in the planning process. Now, what is the duration of a city sanitation plan? Typically, these are long-term plans, 30-year plans. And typically, while we look at the long-term plan, because as I said, no city can get the goals, universal goals, in a short span. It's a long-term game, especially sanitation. We keep reinvesting in the infrastructure and services. And at the same time, we need to have a medium strategy, which is typically 3 years, and a short-term plan of 1 year. So we generally have an annual planning process, a medium-term strategy, and then the long-term goals and a vision to achieve that. So that's a typical planning tools that we align: 30 years, 3 years, 1 year. Now, what are the key pillars of a city sanitation planning process? The key pillars are, number one, who is responsible for, so I'm not in the same order, who is responsible for the sanitation service delivery, who is accountable, which is the institutions. We also look at the technicalities of implementing sanitation planning, sanitation service delivery improvement, what technology we should use, what is the short-term, long-term technology solutions, where should we have sewer system, where should have non-sewer system, what are the regulations around governing this on-site systems. All of that are covered as a key pillar. We look at financials, how much money is required. Then we look at awareness, what sort of awareness we need to create, capacity building, and very importantly, data and monitoring. These are some of the key pillars in the city sanitation service delivery planning process. We have to cover these areas. We cannot just ignore any of these interrelated issues. As I said, we look at access to sanitation, access to toilets, wastewater management, stormwater, wherever water supply interface issue, wherever solid waste management interface issues as components, we address those in the city sanitation planning process. And while the support dimensions, as I said, we have to ensure that we have the right governance, we have the right capacities. We have to ensure that both slum and non-slum, there's no exclusion in the sanitation planning. Financial sustainability is important, and technology options to get where we want to get there. So the baseline, plan, and implementation, it's an iterative process. Now, this requires a phenomenal political ownership and a community ownership. Now, while we do this, some of the important considerations I encourage you to look at, and that's what we are doing right now, is a gender intentionality. Many a times we don't know the unintended consequences of our interventions. We may be excluding some people. We may be excluding particularly women and children. So we have to be mindful of those important considerations. And also we have to be mindful of climate resilience. The reason being that there could be extreme cases of heat waves, extreme cases of excess water supply through rains and flooding. So your city sanitation plan should be robust enough to deal with these extreme cases, and the services should not be disrupted. That is why climate resilience is important. Now, I'm speaking in a theoretical sense, but if you have any clarifications, feel free to ask. Now, what are the steps we follow? Typically, the steps we follow is, first and the foremost thing, we institute what is called City Sanitation Task Force, CSTF. This is a multidisciplinary task force at the city level for owning up the planning process. It is often led by the mayor or the chairperson, as we call, sometimes the administrative in charge of the city, but we have to bring different stakeholders into the ambit of this planning process. We should have mayor, we should have commissioner or city manager, we should have departmental representatives, we should have industries, large institutions, eminent people, NGOs, civil society organizations as a part of this city sanitation task force. So you get brilliant ideas to do this. You get a lot of interesting perspectives. They are the owners of the city sanitation plan. Following that constitution of the plans, then we need to do what is called a preparation of a status report, which is nothing but the baseline, as I said earlier. This baseline has to be communicated to the CSTF members, where we identify what is the current situation, what are the gaps, and encourage them to think about how these gaps can be addressed. Some of these gaps are highly technical in nature, but some of them can be behavior-related gaps. Some of them can be related to, lack of collaboration. Some of them is because they are not aware of it. For example, recently when we went to one of the meetings, many citizens are not aware of the importance of the periodic desludging of their own septic tanks. So this gap assessment would help give a perspective to the CSTF members. Through them, it goes out to the community and various other stakeholders. Once we do the gap assessment and analysis of the data, we will identify what is the demand supply gap against the goals. Then we identify what are the key issues that we have to address. If it is to do with regulation, is it to do with lack of treatment plans or investment requirements, whatever may be the gaps, that gap will be converted into a strategy. It could be a sectoral strategy like water supply strategy, sanitation strategy, on-site versus sewer strategy. And then we convert this strategy into actionable items, both short-term, medium and long-term. And then that would be approved by the CSTF, and eventually it will be approved by the municipal council. That's a planning process we follow. We follow a sequential, very logical way of getting it. Once a planning process is approved by the municipal council and sometimes the state level entity, then it will go for execution. Now, you may ask a question, how do you execute? So the execution can be by creating a specialized technical support unit at the municipal level. So we may have to hire a technical support unit, which is nothing but engineers and planners and others to support the municipal system. So the technical support unit will support the municipality in operationalizing this plan. Now, to summarize, the city sanitation planning and service delivery planning includes status report preparation, identifying key issues, and inputs of CSTF. All of them will enable developing a strategy for realizing the vision. And then, as I said, CSP vision will be achieved by articulating what we want to achieve, what are the strategies and what are the actions, both short-term, medium and long-term. Now, this process typically will take about 6 months, and we will typically get reporting. Every quarterly reporting will be done to City Sanitation Task Force. Now, this is a planning process that we follow in operationalizing a short-term, medium and long-term sanitation planning. The citywide inclusive sanitation planning process that we've been discussing requires a systematic planning tool like what I have described, and it has to follow a guided step-by-step approach that has been articulated. Now, this tool or this process can vary from country to country, city to city sometimes, but by and large, if you follow a systematic process, the chances of success is also very high. Now, this could not be covered last time. I thought I would touch upon this, and if there are any clarifications, if there are any issues that you have in mind, like in Bangladesh, you take both solid waste management as well as part of your ADB programs and other programs. You are also planning for sanitation and solid waste management together. So that's a shared planning process that some of you are following. In some other cases, it is done separately. In India, we follow solid waste management planning process separately and sanitation planning separately, but there are interface issues. Wherever there is an interface, then those interface issues will be dealt. So this is the tool that we use, the city sanitation and service delivery planning tool, for preparing a document for the consideration of the municipal system. And let me also conclude by saying it is not a bounded document which is frozen to death. It is not like we bind it and keep it in a shelf. It is a living document. These documents or these planning processes have to change every 3 to 5 years so that we are agile to the ground realities. For example, some of you visited Warangal. We had a huge flooding in Warangal because of the climate variability. The whole planning process in the city, especially slum areas, got flooded. The FSTP got flooded. We had serious disruption in the service delivery. So we had to step back and start relooking at the whole planning process, and the infrastructure that was created was not aligned with the climate variability context. So we had to relook at the designs. We are relooking at the way the public infrastructure is provided, including the design norms and standards have to be considered differently. There could be a situation of limited water or a drought-like situation. Then we need to relook at it. While we anticipated some of the risks, but all the risks were not covered, hence CSPs have to be relooked at it, and it has to be considered. Very important, one more last point, the land use of the city can change. Now again, give an example of Warangal. The master plan has been recasted in the city, so the development will go in a different way in the years to come. So the city sanitation plan has to align with the changing economic growth anchors that are coming in the city, the changing land use that could happen in the context of the new master plan that is prepared. So the CSP, the city sanitation plan, city sanitation service delivery plan, should align with the city planning process, city economic development planning process. And that is what we need to recognize, that city sanitation planning, which under which we are promoting citywide inclusive sanitation related issues, has to be a living document, a living planning process. And I think I would stop here. And if there are any observations, comments, I'll be very happy to take it. It's a bit of quick rush about CSP, but over to you.
Can I ask a small question?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you, sir. We already started the work on the CWS in my city. It's in the northern in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, and my city name is Mardan. And we already notified, rather the city mayor notified the CWS task team, and the team is basically consists of all the elected chairman of the neighborhood council, because we have council, neighborhood council and village council, and the deputy mayor is chairing. While going through your slide, it's the commissioner, and we have the deputy commissioner, and the commissioner is basically sitting at the divisional level. But the deputy commissioner is, in any case, he is basically the boss to look after all the proceeding at the districts. So, and even we nominated one nominee from the limited company working here in the solid waste management, and even we have a ADB funded project working on fecal sludge management, and so. Can we include the local administration like deputy commissioner or revenue officer in the task team, or it's okay? Because they will go, and the first thing to strategize the CWS, that what's the city need basically, and the sanitation need and all these things. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. So one of the steps that is required and which is often followed is called the stakeholder mapping. Now, deputy commissioner will be a key influencer or a stakeholder in the city management. Now, the stakeholders have to be categorized into interest and influence. So we take what is called a 2x2 matrix, interest and influence. Some of them are highly interested and some of them are highly influential. So they are the top, top professionals or top individuals who should be guiding the CSTF or who should be included in the CSTF. The second category is highly influential, but they're not interested in this. This is another important category. For example, in our case, the members of parliaments, they are highly influential, but they are not interested in sanitation. They are interested in other big things, flyovers. And so what we tend to do is we try to keep them informed and try to move them into interest group. They should also be not influential, but also interest group. Now your question, the deputy commissioner is super important in shaping the city because they have the vision. And I would argue that they should be very much an integral part of the task force. But on one condition, They should not be capturing the conversation. They should not be capturing the agenda. They should allow the stakeholders to have a conversation. So sometimes your point is going back to practical things. We encounter such situations where in our context, we have like you have civil servants, we have Indian administrative officers. We tend to keep them outside the city sanitation task force, but keep them informed about the progress that we make, but capture their vision, capture their perspective and their understanding about the city and how the city is going to grow. So you need to sort of navigate these two situations where the minute you have influential people in the city sanitation task force, highly influential, they tend to capture, they may not give space for others to have a conversation, especially when you have a multi-stakeholder group. We have representations of the poor, we have representations of the industry, we have local political system representatives like councillors. So they should get their space to speak. But when you have a top bureaucrat sitting in it, the others may or may not have the opportunity to speak. So Nazisab, we need to sort of, as facilitators, we need to be mindful of the situation and make sure that there is no power capture by one or two individuals. There should not be a capture of the conversation by one or two individuals at the cost of the rest of them. I hope I have answered your question in a very practical sense.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
We have one more question in the chat box, sir.
Yeah.
While considering sustainability of city sanitation plan, what does really mean from the technological and institutional sustainability?
So when we look at sustainability, as I said, we don't look at environmental sustainability but also look at the financial sustainability. What do we mean by that? It means that if I put a large-scale infrastructure, the operation and maintenance of that infrastructure is equally important. Do we have budgets for it? Do we have the human capital to run the infrastructure? And if I do not have the budgets or the human capital to run the infrastructure or operate these assets, they will eventually fail in 2 to 3 years. They will become the liabilities. So when we are doing the planning, we have to estimate how much is the cost of operation and maintenance, and we have to figure out in the municipal budget a line item for operation and maintenance. If you do not have that, then you may have to change your strategy. You may have to change for a solution, a technology which is manageable. We may have to go for nature-based solutions which have low operation and maintenance cost, or we may have to go for JOCASO-like interventions where the capital cost as well as O&M cost of the sewer system can be very steep, which cannot be afforded by the municipality. Hence, we go for alternate on-site options. So when I mention about sustainability, we look at environmental sustainability from the point of view of water and ecosystem sustainability, but also financial sustainability. And interlinked to that is your technological and institutional sustainability. Whether you have the right kind of institution which is accountable to run the city sanitation plan. If you don't have that institution which is accountable and mandated to deliver your sanitation goals, then there will be a situation of a failure sooner or later. As external partners, as individual institutions, we may drive it. But if you have no accountable entity within the municipal system, then there is bound to be a slippage in terms of service delivery continuity. So it's very important, like the way you have water departments, like the way you have solid waste management department, many municipalities, many Paurashabhas, many local bodies do not have sanitation departments. The sanitation departments are only looking after solid waste. Whereas your non-sewer sanitation, your sewer sanitation, your public conveniences, all of them are left to multiple agencies, and eventually they could fail. So that is what I think is important, to create a clear line of accountability and human capital to drive the whole system. I hope, again, it clarified someone who asked this question. Mr. Shan Nazir, I think.
No, Harshi Sirsena.
Sirsena.
Thank you, Professor. I got the answer. Thank you very much.